when I learned that I need to be very careful about how money goes for the benefit of my daughter Emma. Having an estate plan is really, really important because even if it isn't, my money, if there's a well-intended relative somewhere that wanted to help her, it's really important to have that estate plan in place and to communicate that with family. Because you never know. You never know what long lost relative or who knows, a stranger that sees you in church and loves you and wants to do something. Communicating the fact that there is a proper way to fund for their care without endangering their benefits.
You're listening to the Her Money Story podcast with your host, Felicia Gopaul. Every woman has a story that explains her relationship to money and finances, and a woman's story about money shapes her actions, both positive and not, for years to come. This podcast is for any woman learning how to take care of her money so that her money can take care of her now and into the future.
Hello and welcome, listeners, and welcome back. It's been a while, and I acknowledge that it has been a while since I have put out a podcast on a regular basis, and that's going to change. And it's going to change because one of the things I'm going to be doing on a going forward basis is I'm going to be doing it in seasons. So seasons start and end, and so you can kind of count on me starting and ending the season. But I am so delighted to be back with you. I'm happy to be back in the studio talking to you about a very, very important topic. Now, this podcast is really designed and created for women and the financial challenges that all of us experience as women as we kind of go throughout their life. In 2015, I wrote a book called Preparing for the 5Ds, which includes the downsizing from a job, the death of a partner, disease, disaster, and disability. And the book, and by extension, this podcast is really an extension of the conversation that I started inside the book, because it's really going to focus on the things that women go through that can have a devastating impact on their finances. And I am so delighted today to have today's guest. Today's guest is a colleague of mine at CSP Financial Group. Her name is Mandy Hering, and Mandy is a wife, a mother, and fierce advocate or fierce champion. I'm going to say champion. I think that's a better word for special needs community. She is formerly a teacher who taught high school history, government, and economics in Tucson, Arizona. And before she left that to change her career into financial services in 2021. And we're going to talk to her about why she made that change. I think that's a really important thing. And she has a master's in legal studies with an emphasis on law and economics from the University of Arizona. She's an alumni of the International Community Service and Performing Arts organization Up With People, and I'm going to want to ask a question about how that nourishes her. But welcome. I just really want to start with welcome. Thank you so much for being in my kickoff, my kickoff of the relaunch of my podcast, Mandy. Welcome, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Thanks, Felicia, and it's my honor to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, when I was writing and preparing for the 5Ds, one of the things I talked about is preparing, but when you think about it, it's really not the best title that I could have ever come up with because there is no preparing for these sorts of things. And so you have a daughter who is a special needs daughter. And I just really wanted you to talk about how you started to navigate that. And you can tell as much of the story as you'd like to.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I had Emma, she's 21 years old now. And I never thought about, I know that, when I was pregnant, I was very excited, did everything I was supposed to do, as a, inspecting mom. And, one of the things that they do when when you're pregnant is, do you want to do blood tests? Do you want to figure these things out? And I always said, no, I'm not worried about those tests because it wouldn't change my mind about the pregnancy anyway. So I had already kind of come to that belief that no matter what, whatever God gives me, I'm going to take it on. And when we went to do the sonogram day where you find out the sex of the baby, I found out more than that. And so, I was excited about, oh, we're going to find out whether what we're having a girl or a boy. And I found out we're having a girl, but, yeah, the doctor wants to talk to you, uh, you know, so we found out something wasn't quite right. And did further tests, and we discovered she had a cleft lip and palate. And then lo and behold, I ended up going into premature labor, and she was 3 pounds 10 ounces when she was born. Then we came to find out that she also was born with a rare brain malformation. And so, here we are. I got a 3 pound 10 ounce preemie, and this is what life has given me, and this is what I'm gonna do. And this little girl is a fighter. And to this day, she's very determined. She's nonverbal, but she's a determined little young lady. And maybe she got some of that from me. But I always have to remind myself when she's fighting me and we're going head to head because we're both strong women, that this is why she's alive. So I've been blessed. I believe that God gave me to her. And so it's a privilege to be in this position and to be able to help her through life, and also, like you were saying, to be an advocate and being out there in the world and showing, that we can have a wonderful, beautiful life with her.
Absolutely. Things that I've heard you say is that you are a permanent caregiver. So what does a permanent caregiver mean, and how is that a factor in the life that you're living with Emma?
Yeah. Well, she's going to be with us the rest of her life. She's low functioning. So, I want her to be with us. And so I know that I have to think about her care now. I have to think about her care through my working career, and then providing for her when I can't provide for her, if that makes sense. So I have to think long term and beyond my lifetime and make sure that she's provided for even beyond my lifetime. So enjoying today, but also having that long term mindset.
Got it. So my brother has a special needs son. And so one of the things that we discovered when my father passed away is that we needed to be really careful about how money got left, such that it wouldn't perhaps disrupt his finances and some of the programs that he has in place. And I'm sure that you've given that some thought. So could you talk a little bit about how a parent who is maybe navigating this needs to think about? And ask you to give me 3 things that a parent who is really navigating this situation needs to consider.
Yeah, I would say number one, and I think this is something for everybody, is having an emergency fund. You talk about even just starting by, saving $5 a month, and getting in that habit of saving. That's the first thing, because that helps you do with the short term ups and downs, even though she does have, state benefits with, health care and things like that. There are things that aren't covered and things that you need to cover short term. And being able to do that, having an emergency fund just in general gives you freedom.
Yeah.
We'll talk later about my career change, and having that emergency fund enabled me to do that, and having the freedom to be there for her, wherever she needs. So number one, I would say building up that emergency fund is so important for anybody and everybody. The second thing I would say is, estate planning. And it's something a lot of us don't like to think about. And even really, it was when I learned that I need to be very careful about how money goes for the benefit of my daughter Emma. Having an estate plan is really, really important because even if it isn't, my money, if there's a well-intended relative somewhere that wanted to help her, it's really important to have that estate plan in place and to communicate that with family, because you never know. You never know what long lost relative or who knows, a stranger that sees you in church and loves you and wants to do something. Communicating the fact that there is a proper way to fund for their care without endangering their benefits. And then the
Absolutely.
third thing I would say, oh, sorry, is life insurance. I talked about providing for her beyond my lifetime. Having life insurance is also a really important part of that strategy.
Got it. So emergency fund. So oftentimes you and I will talk about an emergency fund being 3 to 6 months. Is it different when you have a special needs child? Is it different for your family to have? Do you need to have more?
I mean, I lean more towards the 6 months. And really that's a peace of mind factor for me. And I'm a nerd, as you mentioned, my background's economics. So I'm doing the numbers, and I'm even thinking, okay, 3 months of my income, not just expenses, and then 6 months, and then another 3 months of expenses. So I'm thinking, okay, I want nothing to be able to change if something happens for 3 months, that I don't have to change anything in my lifestyle. From there, after 3 months, if things don't recover or we're at the same, now I can get by on my expenses. So that's kind of my mindset, is that, because of the benefits we have and things like that. But as I mentioned, things come up. So I lean more towards that 6 months. But then, like you talk about, that there are other vehicles besides just an emergency fund in the bank account. And then so that goes further into like life insurance and some of those other things, investing.
Is just a will sufficient when you have a special needs child, or does it need to be more than just getting a will done?
Yeah, well, I'm not an attorney, but no, a will is not sufficient. Really, you really should talk to an estate planning attorney, because there is a thing called a special needs trust, and a trust is really important. That, yeah, a no, a will is not sufficient.
Got it. Perfect. And you're talking about life insurance. It's just like nobody wants to talk about life insurance, man. But why is it important for, especially, I think it's important, you and I both believe that it's important no matter what, but it's really critical when you have a special needs child like Emma. So talk to me about why life insurance is so important for a family like yours.
Yeah, like I
Well,
said,
it's important. I'm not going to say a family like yours. So let me
yes.
retract that. So for every family, why is it important that they have life insurance?
Yeah, and even more so when you have a special needs individual. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It goes back to the estate planning conversation. People are afraid to talk about it because it means acknowledging that, someday you will die. And so it's the same thing, and thinking about, I have to provide for her, and life insurance is actually a very affordable way to be able to provide for her beyond when I can't. I also have a son who's an amazing young man who's going to do fine taking care of himself. And I know sometimes people even think that, well, it's not my responsibility to take care of my kids. When they grow up, they're responsible for themselves. And so that's part of the, maybe a little bit more of the life insurance, particularly for Emma, to make sure that eventually my son is going to have to help take care of her, and I want him to have the tools that he needs to be able to provide for her when I can't anymore.
Absolutely. That is really key and critical. One of the things that I have seen, or the statistics tell us, and I saw something in Psychology Today, and they were talking about the divorce rate of couples with special needs can be as high as 87%, which I think
Yes.
is outrageous. You were talking about the fact that it puts stress on you as a family member. It puts stress on you as a couple. It puts stress on the family having this dynamic. So just talk to me and say something encouraging for a family that is going through that. You and your husband have been together almost 24 years. So, what's been a factor, would you say, that was important in helping you guys survive and thrive through a stressful situation? I mean, it's stressful to have kids in general, but to have a special needs child on top of that can I imagine add a certain dimension to that.
I think it goes back to even just dating. Once again,
Mm,
before even having Emma, being honest in a relationship and who I am and who he is, and being unapologetically me. And I'm a different kind of person, and not hiding that. I'm a bit crazy and a bit fun, and just being that, and attracting someone who balances me out. And really, that's, I think, the key for us, is that we really do balance each other out. When I get too serious about things, he's whispering funny jokes in my ear and making me get out of my serious way, and vice versa. So really balancing each other out, and that we're similar in ways, but we're also very different ways, and that helps. And being a team, that we are equal in our relationship when it comes to money. And even going back to that emergency fund, I really recommend everybody have their own emergency funds. Even in a great marriage, that a woman should have her own emergency fund and the man should have his own emergency fund. And so I think that's part of it. We respect each other for who we are, and we view each other as equals. And when it does get stressful, there are times where I'm handing over the screaming child. I just can't do it anymore. Here you go. I'm going in the other room. And he's like, yep, go, you know. And I would like to add to that, I think another important thing for anybody who's a caregiver, whether you are caring for your parents, your children, especially as a child, it's really important to take care of yourself. And
oh
I
yeah.
think oftentimes we don't. We self-sacrifice, and it ends up being to the detriment of the person that we're taking care of.
Absolutely. So I took care of my father for 7 years, and then my brothers took care of him for the last 2 years. And I tell people, and I say it jokingly, but it was partly true. I think I slept for the first 3 months after I invited my brothers to take care of him, because I hadn't really realized the impact that it was having on my health and my mental health and all the rest of it. I ended up having, when I made the decision, I was in Chicago for a conference, and somebody was talking about developing a business that's very similar to um, a place for mom. And so they were kind of grappling with, what kind of messaging should they have. And I said that what you don't understand is there is an impact on the person who is the caregiver, and then the other family members don't necessarily understand. And I realized when one of the things that I said is how upset I was, and I'm going to actually say the word how angry I was with my brothers for not being supportive of helping me take care of the same fathers that we all had. And the thing that was important about that is when I came to that realization and I'm flying back, I'm telling you, I felt really sorry for the guy who was sitting next to me. I cried for the whole flight from Chicago to California. This guy was like handing me tissues the whole time. Are you okay? Are you okay? But there was like this release. You know what I'm saying? There was just this release that I had to kind of go through in order to first and foremost give me myself permission to take care of myself, and really, just as I said, I hadn't really fully understood the the impact that it had on me, until I made the decision that, you know what, I'm going to share the responsibility of taking care of my father with my brothers. Now, not everybody has that, but I really want to encourage people and really double click on what Mandy says, is it's really important that you take care of yourself when you're in a situation where you're taking care of somebody else.
Yeah, well, crying in public, that's something I've done many times too. So I've been there with that. We're like, why is this lady just crying? You know,
Yep, I
it
understand.
happens. But yes. As independent women, and that's something I've always been very determined to be independent. But part of that is, that, and I call it mom guilt, where you feel like I have to put myself aside because I have to take care of others. And it really took me a long time to realize that actually, to be a great caregiver, I do have to kind of take a step away. I really love to travel, and making a priority to take that time. And it takes a lot of work to make all the arrangements to be able, I love to go to Europe, and to be able to take the time and make all the arrangements to make sure she's taken care of, but then do those trips. And then I come back and I'm the best mom and the best caregiver. And that's better for her too, not just me. That's better for her. So yeah.
Absolutely. So I absolutely love the fact that you are taking the time to take care of yourself. And where are you going on your next trip? When I talk to travelers, travelers are always got a next trip. So what's your next trip, Mandy?
Of course I do. Of course I do. Well, you mentioned I traveled and up with people, and we have a reunion in Ireland coming up in 2026. So I
Oh,
have my Up with People reunion in Ireland.
all right. Well, that sounds absolutely fabulous. So you've done some volunteer work and you worked with the organization Up with People. Tell me about how that feeds your soul.
Oh my goodness. Well, I said my love of traveling, and I traveled and up with people back in 1996. I was in college, and it was something I knew I wanted to travel, and it was a great way to, and I love community service, and it really tied all that together. We had a cast of 145 people from 22 different countries, and we traveled around the United States and Europe, staying in host families, performing a Broadway style musical. And I really got to meet so many different interesting people staying in their homes, learning about local culture in the United States and throughout the world. And it just really opened my eyes to the human experience and how there's so many different people and so many different experiences, and just really being loving and accepting. And now I have friends all over the world, and so when I travel, I couch hop. I go and stay with my friends all over, and I've gotten to bring my husband, I've gotten to bring my son, and yeah, it's just I've been really blessed to have that as an outlet for myself.
Right. So I started with the fact that you used to be a high school teacher. So a little bit about how you made the transition, why you made the transition into this crazy field that I've been in for over 25 years, financial services. What made you make that jump from the stability of a paycheck every single month or however you get compensated within a school to coming into financial services? Well, a really interesting story there.
Yeah, I've always been good at teaching. In my first job in high school, I taught gymnastics. And so I always knew I had a talent for teaching. And really being a teacher is a great career, to be a mom and caregiver, because I'm on the same schedule as the kids. And so I get to work and produce and do what I'm good at, but yet I'm on the same schedule as the kids. And that's wonderful. Um, the thing about teaching is that, when it comes to the pay, I always thought, well, I get paid in time off, and that's a good part of it. I worked hard and got my master's degree, and so I knew that I had potential to do more. Um, I also, something that is difficult, I think, for a lot of moms and caregivers, is realizing that you do have value and that I do deserve to make money. And part of it is providing, but also part of it is just accomplishment, and that I could do more and I could make more money, and then that's okay to make more money. And COVID, I think, was kind of the last thing that kind of made me go, all right, it's time to take that leap and go out and do something else. And I go back again to that emergency fund, that I was able to do it because I had the emergency fund. I was able to take that leap of faith and leave that steady paycheck and go into something that I'm extremely passionate about, but yet still using my same skills. So that's what kind of made me take that jump.
Got it. So it was about really being able to take what you know about yourself, in that you're independent, you're smart, you're talented, you like teaching, and really bring it into a new career where you're not limited to whatever paycheck they're gonna give you.
Absolutely. And still have the freedom of my schedule. That's what's amazing too.
That is
I
an
get to set my
amazing thing, and
schedule.
it's one of the things that has kept me in this industry for as long as I've been in the industry. So I love that. So, we're getting close to the end. So I want to wrap it up with really two questions. First and foremost, if somebody heard something in this podcast episode where you're talking about being a permanent caregiver for your daughter, Emma, get in touch with you.
Easiest way is to email me. And that's Mandy, Mandi, at cspfg.com.
All right, perfect. So I will put that in the show notes. One of the things that I enjoy is, and I borrowed it. I borrowed it from Brene Brown. She has a thing that she ends all of her podcasts with, where she asks them to put together a soundtrack. And I'm not asking you to put together a soundtrack, but what's the one song that you would say is the soundtrack for this season of your life?
Oh my goodness. I wish it was something more profound, but what comes to my head is Billy Joel's You May Be Right. And in that song, he just talks about embracing the craziness. And, you may be wrong and you may be right. And who knows? He talks about my husband. It talks about, I find you there alone in your electric chair, and I told you dirty jokes until you smile. And so really it's just about take life, life is serious, and take life serious, but enjoy the crazy too, and embrace it and go with it.
Got it. So, Mandy, it has been absolutely delightful to have you on my podcast, and I thank you for your time today. I think you have shared some great insight, and I love the fact that you were encouraging our listeners to take care of themselves. I think that is something that we as women are not necessarily really good at, and I think that that's really important. And I love the fact that what you've done in your own life is you've gotten a great partner who helps you navigate this, as well as you really take the time to enjoy your life by doing things that you enjoy. And I think that those are all important things for people to take away from this podcast.
Well, thank you for what you do and for doing this podcast, because it's because of people like you I can share what I think is important. So thank you for who you are and who you are in my life outside of the podcast too. So.
All right. So listeners, I want to, again, welcome you back to the Her Money Story podcast. I invite you to keep coming back to listen to more of these interviews and conversations with various different women who have had various different experiences in their life, because I'm sure in the listening, you will hear yourself. So thank you again, and keep coming back for the next episode of the podcast. And I promise you, it won't be that long.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Her Money Story podcast. Want more from Felicia Gopaul? Then subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss a minute. While you're there, feel free to rate and leave a review. We really appreciate it. And if you're interested in going deeper, visit FeliciaGopaul.com. Thank you again, and we'll catch you in our next episode.